Welcome to the American Folklife Center's 2022 Homegrown at Home concert series. I'm Stephen Winnick. For many years, we've presented the Homegrown concert series featuring the best in folk music and dance from around the world in Washington, D.C., in the Library of Congress. But in the year 2020, because of the global pandemic, we shifted to producing an online video concert series, which we've been calling Homegrown at Home. Artists in whatever configuration they can safely play in record a video concert for us and submit it to us for the series. So now it's 2022, and this is our third year of Homegrown at Home concerts because we're still being cautious about bringing audiences together. We love to support and present Indigenous artists in the series, and this is our second year running in which we're presenting Inuit musicians. So this year, it's a group based in Alaska, and we are very proud to bring Bamyoa into the series this year. So to get some more background and context for our concerts, we interview the performers whenever we can, and I am here today with members of Bamyoa, Philip Blanchett and Stephen Blanchett. So welcome, Philip and Stephen.
Hello.
Guiana.
Guiana.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So you're very welcome. We love to have these conversations. And one challenge I do have in doing these interviews is pronouncing the names of bands and people from a wide variety of cultures. So do you want to pronounce your group's name to be sure that we have it right from the beginning?
Well, you had it perfect. The name of our group is Bamyoa. And the P is a little deceiving, but it's pronounced more like a B in our language, Bamyoa.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
excellent.
you said it.
Bamyoa.
All right. Got it.
So great. Thank you so much. So while we're talking about the language and how things are pronounced, just tell us a little bit about Yupik.
Yeah, well, we come from the southwestern part of Alaska. We known as the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, which is home to Mamtereluk, which is a town that we grew up in, and about 57 villages that surround that hub, that regional hub. And that's home to the Yupik Inuit people. Our language is called Yupik. Our people are called Yupik, and it's part of the Inuit language family, which quickly it spans from like the kind of the eastern part of Russia, all through the southwestern part of Alaska, including the Sugpiaq and Alutiiq, up in the Inupiaq area of Alaska, over northern part of Canada with the Inuit, the Inuktitut, Inuvialuq, and then in Kalaallisut in Greenland. So that's home to the Inuit language family, and so which is a very closely related language, and which is kind of the basis of a lot of our music, and kind of reaching into our cultural foundation. One of our members is from Greenland. And so, we love incorporating those traditional aspects of our Inuit brothers and sisters.
Excellent. So in reading a little bit about your music, I found out about the kind of song that people call drum songs among the Inuit peoples. Could you explain a bit about the drum song tradition, what that is?
Yeah, there's a lot kind of is difficult. I hate to say lost in translation, but it's the definitions are more of a conversation, because when describing the music that we're inspired from, it comes from a tradition of ceremony that involved dancing, which is very still popular today in our culture, is our form of dancing. And those, of course, to dance, you need something to dance to. And so those are the songs that we that inspire each song, or each dance. And the choreography is kind of painting the picture of what's being talked about in each song. And for within our culture, and actually all the Inuit cultures and most indigenous cultures, the most important accompanying instrument is the drum. And so we have our songs and our traditions we like to call them drum songs, because, when we started years ago recording our music, it kind of it's a little bit out of context because you're missing the performance of the dancing and the ceremony of the event, which makes it even more special. And but when you're just talking about the songs themselves, we like to refer to them as drum songs because of the relationship that it has to the tradition.
So, what about the drums themselves? Are there different kinds and different sizes of drums for different dances and songs, or is it a sort of standard drum that is used?
Yeah,
There's
there's a variety of drums, of course. Different types of skins that you use on the drums. Traditionally, with our drums, we typically make them the hoops out of like driftwood, and then the skin on there would be from membranes of like the stomach lining of a walrus or a whale or a large seal like a mukluk seal, the bearded seal. So that would be the skin on there. There's different ways of also drumming. For instance, in the Yupik culture, we drum on top of the skin, where Inupiaq culture, they drum underneath. And it just creates a little bit of a different sound. And then some of the Greenlandic and the Canadian style drumming, the drums will look similar, but the mallet, that drumstick, will be different, which also creates a different sound and a different way of hitting. Which changes the dynamics of the drum and the sound of the drum as well. So, and then you start getting into drum dancing. So there's the drum songs and there's drum dancing, which are two different things. That's typically what our drums and the drumming style and the style of hitting. Yep.
Well,
if you could talk a little bit about. Oh, sorry.
I would say in North Greenland, the rims, they have the small drums, where it's a bone that is the and polar bear that's as the skin. And so there's, depending on where what part of the Inuit territory you're in, there's different, like Steve said, a different range of drums. But the Yupik drums are pretty similar size and design. But of course, traditionally the handles, each one is made, unique to, the drum maker. And so you see a lot of the characteristics. And Aussie, who's a member of our group, is a master drum maker, and he's made drums all over. Like his drums is probably every school district in Alaska and all throughout Greenland. And
you can't just go over to like Walmart or Target and buy a drum, or any music store at all. So these are handmade drums. So each one is very unique, and there's no like place that you can go and mass produce these types of drums. They're all just very, very unique, which creates a really beautiful sound and a tapestry of like sounds. We were just at a event with that, you'll see in the video, with a bunch of drummers, and it was amazing to hear the breadth of like the different styles of drums that we had there. And it was it creates an amazing symphony of music, which is absolutely powerful, and you can feel it resonating through your body, and then hear it, of course, the sounds of these massive drums being hit, especially in the deeper part of the song, where it starts really getting into the tempo goes up, the intensity of the drumming increases, and it creates a really powerful experience for people, not just us drumming, the dancers, and then people watching.
Yeah, I would agree, and I know that the audience of this interview will also, of course, be watching the concert, and that was a great moment when you had a bunch of drummers together, and that intensity really ratchets up, and you can tell that there's a lot of skill and dynamics to playing those drums, that it's not just rhythm, but there's a lot of stuff going on in terms of where you're going to hit it and exactly how you're going to hit it that is changing the sound as they go.
Yep.
So really a beautiful job done by a lot of drummers there. So thank you for that and for explaining that. Um, so you mentioned drum dancing, and could you tell us a little bit about that also? I mean, I noticed that in the UNESCO listing for Inuit drum song and drum dancing for intangible cultural heritage, they mention both for sure.
Yeah.
So explain what the drum dancing tradition is like.
Well, we've mentioned Greenland. Karina Miller, member of our group, is from Greenland. And so we've been able to have a lot of experiences traveling throughout Greenland and having cultural exchanges. And our culture is so related, and our language is, we can just sit for hours comparing notes linguistically and understanding deep-rooted ways of understanding. And it's really fascinating to see and to talk about the ceremony, the traditional ceremonies that we do through dancing and through our art. In Alaska, because of contact, we still have the time of contact. We still have a strong connection with carrying on our drum songs, drum dancing, our ceremonial traditions. And in Greenland, they have a different style of drumming and celebrating. And their way is drum dancing. That's one of a popular form of dance of celebration, and the singer is the drummer and the dancer. So they're hitting the drum, and then there's a real beautiful way of singing, speaking in the language, singing the songs, and there's many, unlimited amount of songs that how they're performed. And there's and in Greenland, there's, depending on if you're on the East Greenland or South Greenland or North, there's different styles and actually different size of drums. And in Canada, it's almost like in some areas they do drum dancing where it's almost like a perfect combination of the drum sizes and drum shapes that we have in Alaska with the drum dancing like in Greenland. And so they hit the rim of the big drum, and it creates a big resonant sound. And so it's just it's a different experience, and it's really engaging to watch. And I think that the style that we do in Alaska, where we have drummers and singers and we have dancers, it definitely allows for a lot more participation, because actually the name of our group, Bumyua, refers to the tail end of the song, the encore section of the dance. And at that point, that's when customarily anybody from the audience that feels moved can come join the dancers or the drummers and singers and celebrate in that moment. And a lot of times it's so exciting at that, it's the highlight of that piece. And so it's going to say again, Bumyua again. So do it again. And so it continues that. And so there's so much energy with that part of the, our tradition. And so that's where our name comes from, Bumyua.
Great. So another thing I think our audiences will be really interested in is your masks. In the video, there's 3 great masks. I think there may be more, but the 3 that you all wear at once in one of the songs, beautiful masks. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about them.
So our mom is a big inspiration for us, and she had worked many years working directly with elders and traveling to museum collections all around the world, researching particularly masks, but also many different types of items from our people. And so it was a really successful project through the Smithsonian, and the exhibit was called Agayu Liarachput, which means our way of making prayer. And it's talking about the tradition of Yupik masks. And in our dancing, the dancing tradition that we are from, it was a mask dancing tradition. And unfortunately, through contact and colonization and assimilation, and it was the missionaries and the schools and the government that came into Alaska that prohibited so many of the practices of our people, and masks were one of the pinpointed things that were targeted to cancel out of our culture. And so through years of adaptation and continuation of our identity, we've continued to drum and to sing and to have aspects of our ceremonies. And the dancing is a part of that, because there's a lot of social aspects that were not as threatening to the to those so-called authorities. But masks were definitely, that tradition of mask making and masking, using masks, was severely impacted. And so it's really important part of our work to be using masks as a part of our ceremonies and a part of our performance, and including it as a part of our identity. And so it's really it is a kind of an answer of us as individuals taking ownership of our identity and our ancestry, and taking what we do know about our mask tradition and using it. And so we, just like traditional times, we commissioned a incredible mask maker, a Yupik mask maker. His name is Drew Michael, and we worked with him for those particular masks so that we could use them and continue to celebrate our beautiful heritage.
They are amazing masks, and I noticed the one that is it's like a seal, and the face is the belly, on the belly of the seal. Was that a traditional style that Drew drew from in Yupik culture, or do you know whether it's whether there's a lot of sort of modern innovation in the making of these masks now?
Though the inspiration of the masks, there's a whole nother wonderful discovery of what inspires these masks. But the masks, the Yupik tradition of masks, is so inspiring, and there's these multi-dimensional elements of this relationship between human beings and our depiction of our human likeness, and with our relationship with animals. Mm-hmm. And these masks were a way to honor and communicate with each other, and also about our relationship with the animals, and not only the animals, our awareness of the existence of being a part of the universe. And so those elements are commonly depicted in masks in very many different ways. And artists like Picasso are known to have been inspired by the use of this way of visualizing multiple dimensions of awareness. And the masks, kind of like that mask itself, actually comes from an experience that Drew, the mask maker, and myself, we had traveling to a village back home, and hearing about this story about a snowy owl and a seal, and the transformation that happened between the snowy owl and the seal from this artifact that was found there. And so to honor that experience in an upcoming event that we had with Bumyo, where we were performing with the Anchorage Civic Orchestra and a big 200-piece choir singing our songs, we commissioned him to make a mask of a snowy owl, which is the face inside, and then the seal. And it's about honoring the relationship between those. And so and then we actually gifted that mask to Aussie, a member of our group. He's one of our culture bearers and one of our main composers of our traditional songs.
Great. Yeah, those masks are so beautiful. And then with them, of course, there are other aspects of regalia or garb. I mean, you have a lot of feathers and those large hands. And I guess those also represent connection to animals and to other aspects of being. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if you watch our style of dancing, it's rare that you see anyone dancing without something in their hands.
Mm,
And it's for many reasons. One is one of the um, explanations that we've had and what we've heard from our culture bearers and elders is how strong like this energy and the spirituality and the ceremony of these dances are, and that we use these things, those gloves and the hands, the dance fans, as protection from those things, but also they also accentuate movements and dances when you have a culture that doesn't have a written language and things are passed on and told through story, through dance, through these ways of disseminating information and history. We use these things as like accentuation of that. So like with the men's dance fans, they're typically a hoop with feathers that are fairly rigid, and there's always five, which represents different elements. Sky, land, air, spirit. Universe, and then with the women, you see those elements of the universe always in there as well. In like Philip was mentioning, with the masks, but also with caribou fur that kind of just flows and accentuates the beauty of women and the femininity of women. So there's like just all kinds of different reasons for them, and so yeah, it's just beautiful to see. When you have a dance group and they're wearing the beautiful regalia with the headdresses that are also dancing and moving along with the drums. It's really just spectacular.
yeah, it's beautiful to watch, and we thank you for including so much of those elements in the video,
Yeah.
because it gives people a glimpse into the different aspects of Yupik culture. But another thing to ask about, so if listening to your music, one will also notice other musical styles, not just pure Yupik music. So certainly you can hear some gospel in the first song that you sing in the harmonies. So tell us a little bit about that influence, if you would.
Well, if you see, just looking at Philip and I, and knowing Inuit people of the world, you can tell that we are Inuit, but we are also mixed heritage, and our fathers from originally our family and our father's side is from North and South Carolina, and so but he grew up in Philadelphia, and so that element of our culture on our father's side was very much passed down to us. We had two very strong centered parents of their own respective cultures, right? Our mom being a culture bearer in the Yupik, but our father being a very strong black man, knowing and having that pride in being black, and that was instilled in us, and so one of the things that we did growing up was we heard these beautiful musical styles from both of our cultures, and it was a way of honoring our backgrounds, was putting it together through song and dance. So one of our very first songs that we ever started performing and organize, or what do you call that, arranged, was a mix of a traditional Yupik song, an entrance song, which you would often see dance groups coming on and entering. It was done in ceremony, just part of protocol, and then mixing that with one of our favorite songs that we heard growing up in the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church that my father was a minister at. So we mixed those two styles, and it came up, that was our very first one of our very first compositions. So it was very intentional on like showing and showcasing and really being being people who are of mixed culture but uplifting both, and being proud of both of our heritages, and to show that, because we often growing up we saw one being uplifted and the other one, and we did that to ourselves. We'd code switch, when we'd go
Mhm.
to North and South Carolina and Philly, we'd drop our Yupik side and we'd just become black, and then the same thing, go back home in the village and we're straight up in the Ville. But this was a way for us to just to honor both of our heritages, and we did
Mhm.
it in music and dance.
Yeah. And so there's some R&B in there. There's some
Yeah.
pop in there. What are you? What elements are you putting together?
Oh man, Phil, what's your favorite type, man? You hear
Yeah,
that a lot in the music.
reggae, a lot of reggae, and
Yeah,
for
reggae.
us, it basically our group came out of the identity of who we are, and so that's just kind of our direction of how we continue to share music is just to be true to who we are as individuals, and we want we have this we have this really wonderful inspiring inspiration of culture and heritage to honor that. And so there's no reason not to do that through our own creativity of wanting to include jazz, include
Hip hop.
hip hop, all different styles, and just like let it. And as artists, as master artists, it's a reflection of our identity and how we were raised, in our understanding of art, and how to um, um, be connected and to share impactful art that has meaning. And so we're really excited about working with other styles, and that means working with other people that have expertise in those styles, and still having it be connected to the meaning and the intention of our group. And so it's really exciting to see because we really don't plan what the sound is going to be, and that's why it's so difficult to explain, because really it's always just a discovery and then kind of an uncovering of what's inside.
Right. It's wonderful to see that kind of combination of styles. And I wonder, so it's fair to say that you've achieved some acclaim within the Yupik community and more widely among sort of anyone who follows indigenous music. People know of your group as a sort of trendsetter or trailblazer, I should say. But were there people within the Yupik community or the Inuit community more widely doing this before you started? That is, combining your traditions with African American music or with other styles of music?
Rock and roll.
There was rock and roll. There was Joe Jim Paul. He was he was blind guitar player, and Yupik. I don't know what village he was from, but there's recordings of him going into the KYUK, our local radio station, and these old recordings of him singing, because in our tradition it's a storytelling tradition. So we have our drum songs, but we also have just other different types of songs, like children's songs, and then we have stories, and there's these long stories where interwoven into the story are these little songs of the characters, and the things that they would sing as a part of the narrative. And so there's some recordings of Joe Jim Paul,
Joe Jim Paul. There's
singing
John and
these
Gayak.
songs. Yeah, John and
Gayak, and then Robert Gregory. Those are probably the three guys that kind of that were doing this back in the 70s and 80s.
Rock, folk,
but doing a lot of rock and roll,
and folk, and using the guitar, and then singing those songs and telling those stories with the chords changing and singing in Yupik.
Yeah.
And so
all in Yupik.
So we were definitely influenced by that, how accessible that was and how we would hear it on the radio. And those were people that were a part of our community, which means for us, we're related. They're part of
Yeah.
our family. And so it really made sense for us to want to do that, because people really respond well, and our language is really well suited to, because it's very rhythmic and it's also very poetic.
Oh yeah, because it's a vowel, consonant, vowel, consonant, vowel, consonant, vowel, consonant. So it has that da 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 da. And we have some words that are very long. You know, one word can be several sentences, right? So
Yeah.
that one word can just really be very poetic, and so that's why a lot of our songs, when we're explaining them, sometimes if you're a fluent speaker of the Yupik language or Inuit language, you would like the literal translations are sometimes like it's kind of interesting, because the literal translations is completely separate from what the actual meaning of what is being presented, you know, through the dance or the song. Yeah, so it's like it just really is dependent upon the composer of these songs, and really kind of peeling away at the meanings of what that person meant, you know, rather than taking things super literally.
As a whole, it's this beautiful statement, but within it, it's almost these fragments that represent a story. And that's kind of how the songs, our traditional songs, are kind of formed, which is nice for me, you know, as a non-fluent speaker. It's really inspiring to be connected to our traditions that way, but also it's very interpretive, and in that way, as part of my identity, it's really wonderful to be able to have that, to understand that as artists and as people, we have that kind of that license to interpret and create our own work, and to have our own voice, and that's okay. And these limitations of like, well, I'm also allergic to fish, which is the 99.9% diet of Yupiks, and those limitations don't take away your ability to be connected to your identity. It just changes, and it just offers a new way to share who you are, and that represents. And within our group, we proudly share that, and we want to represent, in the best way that we can.
Yeah. So how did you come to start Bumyoa as a group? I mean, where and when did the journey begin, would you say?
Long ago.
Before you were born, probably. Seems like it.
Yeah, it seems like a lifetime ago. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Our mom was living out of the state in the 80s, and she was reconnected with a Yupik artist named Chuna McIntyre, and they started a really strong friendship and partnership, and she performed as well as with other Yupik people from our area to perform all over. So she performed at the Kennedy Center, at the all over the world. We would get postcards from her growing up in elementary school and junior high and high school. And so through those years, it really created, and she would share those songs, and it became part of our vernacular. It became a part of our experience. And so it was part of our story growing up and our identity. And so as we became a little bit older, there were opportunities to be involved in the community, mostly in the school community, but the community dancing. We don't have real powwows here in Alaska, but we have events and gatherings that are kind of similar. And so we became really involved in those community groups, and it created more of an understanding and awareness in the culture. And then after some time, Steve and I were doing a dance, and I was actually sharing a dance with Steve, and then he started harmonizing to what I was teaching him. I was teaching him the traditional way, and he started harmonizing, and we both had never heard that particular sound in that way. I mean, it was clearly something unique, but it also felt familiar in so many ways, almost like it sparked neurons, like it had this connection that it sounded like Ladysmith Black Mombasa. It sounded like, the sweet harmonies of that we grew up hearing in some of the folk traditions back home, like Slavic and other things. And also reminded us of our experiences in the church, in the Black church, hearing gospel. But for us, we as young kids, we liked Jodeci and R&B, Boys to Men, and so for us it was like, whoa, we sound like those guys, and so it was just like a mixture of so many things. And so immediately we just expanded on that and took on the repertoire that our mom had taught us through her life, but a lot through her experience with Chuna performing those songs. And basically we're like Chuna McIntyre, the next generation, in our own way, taking on these songs. And he would share songs kind of like us that were from different parts of the region. And it was so appreciated by all, because it's just carrying on this tradition in this way that is that wasn't really, that not a lot of people know about, but also that, in this time, there's so much that's being lost. And it's so important to continue these stories in this style. And so we're kind of a response of that call to embrace it and embrace what we have. And but outside of our group, we have a strong tradition in certainly certain areas of our area that are thriving in more of a traditional way, that are continuing songs that, that basically, I wouldn't say put us to shame, but that represent the traditions of their family, their particular families in connection to the songs. And the songs that we did in the video represent those families and the tradition of where these, so it's much deeper, and we're actually just borrowing and sharing these songs. And it's a real honor to be able to be a caretaker of these songs.
It's good to hear you mention Chuna McIntyre. I'll mention that Chuna was at the Library of Congress back in the early 2000s and performed in this same concert series, actually, that you're performing in. And
maybe our mom too.
It's possible that your mom is there. I don't have the full list in front of me of who was in the group with Chuna, but it's possible. Yeah. And I'll just say for the audience that in the blog in which this video will be presented, there's also a song, at least, from the Chuna McIntyre concert. So look for that down below the video players where you'll see this this interview. So it's good to know that you have that connection, because it's a long-standing connection for us also, and our attempt to present music from your community as sensitively as we can. So thank you for being the next generation of Chuna McIntyre. So what was it like when you first started to play venues outside of your home communities?
Let me take that one.
Yeah, it was.
I think we all had different experiences. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I feel like from my standpoint, there was such an acceptance, and it's almost a hunger for within the non-native community, especially in Alaska. There was so much unknown about this relationship that we have with the indigenous people, and there was so much kind of unsaid and unspoken, unshared, unfeatured, and so there's so much I hate to say ignorance, but there was a lack of understanding.
Mhm.
And so when we did our first performances, and the way that we presented ourselves was just like so excited to be doing it, and we're not asking for permission, we're doing it in a very intentional and personal way. And so then we kind of led that experience, and then we involved them, like, hey, are you listening? And they're like, what, me? And then we're like, say it, and do it. And then so we were able to utilize that structure to be able to kind of create a dialogue and break down a lot of barriers, so that no matter where we went, people were like just appreciative of the opportunity to not only learn and be entertained, but also to feel like they have a sense of ownership in the experience, that they now can say, Bamyua, and understand how it's pronounced, and say huaka, like a greeting in our language, and understand really simple things. And those simple things actually are really important, and they go a long way. So we created relationships with in those experiences, and that was a real great benefit for us as artists, as a springboard to, like, become successful, through our career, but also was, really wonderful way to connect and engage with all kinds of audiences, no matter where we're at.
Great. Steve, did you have something to add? I know you.
No.
Or-
I mean, I think Philip summed it up really well. I mean, it's fun. It's so, like, we try to break down those barriers, those walls that are there. And often, like, if we're in a concert hall or in a performing arts center, like, forget that you're there, and we'll reach out and we'll just grab our audience and do it, like, with force, because we just love it. We just love our cultures. We love our songs. We love what we do. It's like, for us, it's like the best job in the world. And for us to know that we've been doing this for almost 30 years it's crazy for us. Like we said, it was a lifetime ago. And it took us a while for us to really to understand, like, really the significance of it all, especially within the Indigenous community and the Inuit community, and the impact, that it had, and because of those, creating those relationships and those connections. And but it's interesting, in the last, with you guys, Library of Congress, and like you mentioned that, that you're focusing on Indigenous artists and like that. I feel it's in the last 5 or so years, if I feel like we've seen this, like, Indigenous pop culture explosion happening, and it's really interesting to be a part of that, right? Because we've been doing it for a long time, but we're all of a sudden seeing this new and different life that's happening within Bamyua, because of, like, this this Indigenous pop culture that's happening. We have those shows. We got Res Dogs, Reservation Dogs. You got Rutherford Falls. You got all, Quanah Chasing Horse blowing up the Met Gala with her traditional tattoos and her regalia, and, like, Nicholas Galanin, that big huge sign, Indian land, and, like, you're seeing these things just happening all over the place, and this these new shows that are happening, and it's like, if it feels really it feels good to be a part of, and it feels good to be seen, and for seeing others that are really going to be benefiting from this new connection, and this pop culture explosion that's happening in the Indigenous world.
Yeah, that's great. I think sort of an early outlier of that phenomenon, right, of the sort of revitalization or at least noticing of the Indigenous arts by other folks, was the opening of the National Museum of the American Indian by the Smithsonian, and you guys were there at the founding moment for that. So, so talk to us a little about your experience of playing at the opening of that museum.
That was wow. That was a window into the past. It was wow. It was amazing. Like
Powerful.
when we represented the North and we did that blessing. You know, there was the 4 directions.
It's the same
blessing.
song that we danced in the video. So the one with the mask, that the purification song, that's what we.
Yeah, and we did that as the blessing song, blessing the direction of the North. And at that time, you know, during the procession, and the marching in of all the folks, those 80,000 people, you know, we were on one side of the mall, so we had half of those folks, and it was so cool to just like, we were just standing there. We stood there the whole time as they were just walking by and just greeting people, and we connected with all these. We got reconnected with all these places that we had been over those decades. It was like this window into our history, like
It was crazy.
seeing a little bit of our life just kind of walking by. It was surreal, huh? It was crazy.
Yeah,
And
because
then to be the first group performing up on the stage, you know, it was like, you know, all kinds of great honors. But it was for me, the takeaway was just shaking the hands and hugging all those people that we connected with over the years. It was beautiful.
yeah, it's magic that to be reconnected. Because when I was describing how we interact with the audience, we create those connections, but then, you know, eventually we get on an airplane and go home.
Yeah.
And then we end up having, you know, life goes on, but you know, those experiences were so beautiful. And, you know, when we go to a community and stay in their home, or, you know, like meet their family, all of those, we basically, because of that opening, got to like have a reunion with like Native people that are connected themselves to, you know, indigenous culture, indigenous issues, and prioritize to be there because it was such an impactful event. And to be there, it was undescribed. You know, we didn't know what to expect, and it was just magical. It was.
I felt like we watched half our life walk by us.
That was so long ago.
So just to fill us in a little more about the other main members of Pamyoa, because, you know, we're talking mainly to the two of you, but there are some other folks in the group, and tell us a little bit about them, if you would.
Oh, our family.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with the Danes. Let's start with the Danes.
Well, there's Karina, and you mean Karina and Aussie?
Yeah, Karina and Aussie for the most part, yeah.
Well, you want to, I'll do Aussie and you do Karina.
All right.
So back when Steve and I first started the group in '95, we did a performance, and we had our mom, and there was the late Ben Snowball and Marie Tyson. There were elders in our community that were good friends with our mom, and that basically they were the first members of Pamyoa in the sense that they backed us up in our performance, drumming while we danced. And we did that performance, and it was such an incredible first time performing. It was so well received, and the feedback we got was like that we were on the right path, and we almost like we have to do this. But we knew that if we were going to do it, we can't be bringing these elders with us everywhere we go. So we were looking for a peer who had the eldership and the foundation, and that's where we found Aussie. We knew Aussie, and he was suggested or recommended, and we asked him, like, you know, he knew dancing. He's fluent in his language. He's from his Chafornik village. He just graduated from college with an art degree, and we were like, "Can you sing?" And he was like, "Yeah." We're like, "All right, you're in." And so we Yeah, so Aussie joined the group.
That's when
and,
we became Bumua. Our first, that was the official where we said we are Bumua.
Well, not entirely, because we were it's so long ago. There's many
BIA?
versions of yeah, we were still BIA, and it wasn't. Then we in '96, like about 7 months later, we had met Karina, and did we come? Were we Bumua? We were
We were
Bumua.
Bumua way before that. We came out.
Okay.
We came out with that Wasilla gig, the very first performance with Aussie.
Okay. Anyways, so Aussie joined the group, and he was a great. He knew a lot of the same songs that my mom taught, because the songs that Chuna that they did were very. Chuna and that group had a huge impact in the community, sharing these songs in the schools and then in different communities, and so they were pretty familiar songs, and so it was really easy for us to share our repertoire and to build on it. And so the three of us, me, Steve, Aussie, and I, performed. Our very first gigs was 10 shows in the Matsu Borough School District. And our first performance was in the school that Steve graduated in, Wasilla High School, where Sarah Palin graduated from, and that was our very first performance, and with Aussie, Steve, and I, and we walked in, and the social studies teacher, the people who were like apologizing in advance of what a horrible experience it was going to be, pretty much, of how bad the kids were, and we just kind of set that aside, and then we came in and we had 2 standing ovations from those kids, and it was an incredible experience. Our very first time performing together, and
then we met Karina at the Arctic Winter Games. She was representing Greenland, and we were representing Alaska. And unfortunately for her, and fortunately for us, her bandmates that were supposed to be backing her up were coming from a different community in Greenland, and which was only serviced by helicopters, and the only helicopter that there was broke down, so they didn't make the trip to the Arctic Winter Games, which was held in Eagle River at that time. So she came to the organizers of the events in the music venue to ask if there's some folks that she can perform with, or some musicians. And when she came into that venue to talk to the folks, that's when we were on and we were performing. So we just got done off the stage, done with our performance, and we were walking backstage, and this beautiful, beautiful woman was like, "Will you sing with us or sing with me?" And I was like, "Heck yeah!" And so that was it. And we learned a couple of her songs, and a few days later, we were performing with her at the Arctic Winter Games. And then about a week later or so, she was performing with us. She ended up extending her trip, and had about 3 or 4 shows with us
pivotal
that we had
shows
scheduled, and which was, some of those might have been that school shows, right? And so that's how it happened. That's how we met her, and from her we met a lot of other musicians that, like Christopher Yule, our longest musical collaborator from Copenhagen, Denmark, and he was on our first album playing piano and so from there it just kind of grew and grew and grew, and we have this family of musicians that have been with us, most of them for 20 plus years, and that's
wonderful. Well, we could talk all day, but unfortunately we have a time limit, so I'm going to ask just a couple of questions about the video, and I guess one question that may not be obvious from the video itself: where was it actually filmed?
Oh yes, it was filmed in Anchorage, Alaska, in the east side of town, in a venue called the Alaska Native Heritage Center, which is a cultural center that represents all the native cultures of Alaska. And they have this beautiful lake, Lake Tiulana, which are surrounding the lake, are representations of our traditional homes in pre-contact times. And so the places that you see us performing at in the video are inside a traditional gazgek, and then inside where the group was, the larger group, when we had the community dancers, that was inside the Athabaskan Hall, which is a representation of the kind of the cultural, the ceremonial home halls where a lot of events and things like that happen to Athabaskan culture. And I believe we did one scene in the Inupiaq, traditional Inupiaq house. So that's where it was held. Just a beautiful, beautiful space. And definitely if people come to Alaska or to Anchorage, we would definitely recommend them coming to see the Heritage Center, because it's not only is, you see those beautiful sights, but it really is a window into the cultures of Alaska. Especially if you want to get to know the different cultures. It's not just people think of Alaska and they think, the Inuit or the Eskimo, but we have 22 different languages and all kinds of different cultures, and so it's a really awesome place to go to.
Well, thanks for filling us in on that. I hope people do get an opportunity to go and visit Alaska and particularly that center, because it'd be great to sort of spread the knowledge of how these traditional cultures lived and all of the wonderful displays that they have of culture there. So I guess one last question about the video is just who were the other dancers, that big community and that one scene that there were so many folks. Where did you find all those people who wanted to participate?
That just it's also magic that magically happened. That we should have expected it. But so Aussie in our group, he is the leader of a traditional Yupik dance group called Achilchok, and they've been together for some years now, and they would regularly before COVID would get together every Wednesday at the main lobby of our Alaska Native Medical Center. It has this beautiful entryway, and they would just dance every Wednesday and just open. Anybody can go, and you would go there, and it would just be packed with people from all over. Yeah, from all over, and he is the drum leader for that, and it's a community group, so it's open to some people from all over. And so post-COVID, they've been starting to have their practices again, and they luckily, I think we just happened to just pick the right day to film our our concert, because they were having a practice on that day in the structure next door to where we were filming, and we didn't really plan this out. But I did ask Aussie that after we do our performance, what I'd like, my vision is that we can do a dance and invite some dancers. So we actually thought we were going to have dancers come join us, but it was us joining them. So they were having a practice, and we kind of we walked in, and it was actually another surreal kind of moment, because we didn't expect.
We thought we were going to see maybe 5 or 10 people, and to walk into that room with about 150 people and all those drums, it was perfect. So it was a perfect example of really how powerful the tradition and the strength and the pride that we have with the dancing, and especially in the communities. That's that pretty much sums it up. What you're gonna see, what you see in that video is that's how it is.
Wonderful. So just one final question. Given that this interview will be on the channels of the Library of Congress, is there anything I didn't ask about, anything that you would like to say to our Library of Congress audience?
No, well, I definitely want to recognize Ivan Knight on guitar, Sarah Anderholm on keyboards and bass, and then Cameron Cartland played drums with us, and we had a wonderful crew. Our sound guy, Alan Nielsen, is a dear friend and amazing. His Yupik sound engineer here, and we love working with him. And then Ethan Feaster, he's the one who did the video, and so we had a wonderful time together. And so we hope you guys enjoy the production, the Bum You Up production, and it was a real honor to put together something that not only represents our group, but also that that represents our culture and hopefully fits with what you guys share. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, Kuyana.
Well, thank you both so much, and thank your friends for us, your family for us, your other musicians for us, because they all did such a spectacular job, and the crew as well. It's a beautiful video, and we are just really grateful to have this opportunity to present it, and also to present this conversation with you. So once again, thanks to Philip Blanchett, Stephen Blanchett, and the whole Bamyua family.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kuyana.